Hello and welcome to The Hash, where we highlight the best that crypto news has to offer on this day of the week. I am Zach Seward. I am joined by Naomi Brockwell, Will Foxley, and Jen Sanasi. Let's get going. Naomi, you're going to start us off today.
I'm going to start us off. And it's a very serious note that we're starting the show today. As you all know, tomorrow is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It's an event that dramatically changed the face of American culture, how we live our lives here. And so it's important to kind of dig into this, dig into the history of this, and talk about the legacy that has been left from this, especially in this surveillance age that we're now living in. So I wanted to just talk about that for a little bit. There was this great article in Wired that sort of dug into the legacy of the surveillance state, the fact that this has kind of become normalized now. We have these temporary measures that are put in place in the aftermath of something horrific, and then that's sort of taken advantage of, and these temporary emergency measures sort of persist. So of course, we're talking about things like the Patriot Act, which really became this invasive part of all of our lives, just ended up creating so much blanket surveillance for American culture. So, all of that is something that on the show we cover it regularly. We're talking about this through the lens of sovereignty in terms of money, sovereignty in terms of data. And this is something that is quickly being eroded away. But there are people who are creating technologies and decentralized technologies in particular that are helping give us back some of that. But I wanted to just throw this to the group to start off with. This is such a momentous event, anniversary for everyone in America who especially lived through this. And it's just really left such a scar. But then I think the worst part of the scar may be just this legacy of just overreach and how normalized it has become. All of the cameras that you see up, all of the boards that you see up, everything just kind of like freedom's becoming curtailed. And also, in the wake of COVID as well, I think there are a lot of similarities there. The Wired article brought up that, just talking about how a lot of people, residents start to frame threats and use COVID as an excuse to eliminate things they don't like, eliminating things like skateboarding and drug use and music, and putting this all through the frame of safety threats. So it's important as a society to kind of look at this and decide whether this is the world we want to live in, something that sees these threats and just tries to stamp out things that we don't like. But Zach, I'm going to throw it to you to start off with. A very, very heavy topic to start. I'm sorry about bringing that to the table. Just thought it's important to mention on this anniversary.
Yeah, certainly worth reflecting on. I think everyone, has their own personal stories from that day that, stick with us 2 decades later. And I think this weekend will be one of much reflection. It is interesting to think of financial surveillance and the way that Bitcoin has emerged out of that context, right? Bitcoin was created in the wake of the financial crisis we often hear, but it was also, pseudonymous by design, I think in response in part to some of the security measures that were implemented and have remained since 9/11. So to think of this system as a potential alternative to some of the financial surveillance that we see, along with sort of the physical world surveillance that we also live through on a daily basis, it's interesting to think just how much crypto has been influenced by 9/11, and it would be interesting to unpack that further, I think. But it's really interesting to think about what a pseudonymous by design system means in a world that was shaped in these past 2 decades largely by surveilling activity online. And I think some of the cypherpunks, saw the downsides of that early. As early as the early 90s, these people were talking about, okay, when everything's online, it's going to be much more easy to surveil our every waking movement, and especially how we spend our money. So interesting to think about how these two major events, 9/11 and Bitcoin, are in dialogue with each other. Here we are in 2021 still talking about it. So lots to reflect on. But, we could go any number of ways with this. I'll toss it down to Will for his thoughts.
Yeah, just I guess on a historical note, tomorrow is extremely significant. That doesn't need to be said again. But I think just for younger folk who didn't live through that moment or have vague memories of it, it's interesting that they live in a world where the consequences of that day are just very palpable. You have online surveillance, and then there's even banking surveillance nowadays. I know the Biden administration is moving forward, at least the Treasury is moving forward with some new amendments to how banking information is tracked, going down to as low as even $600 per transaction being tracked by the Treasury, which is Pretty startling, and a lot of this has historical tiebacks to the war on terror and acts of terror committed on U.S. soil. And so we have those historical happenings have effects today. And I think a lot of people who are using these applications are really fun. They're using NFTs, they're using DeFi applications. Those products came out of that moment, just like you said, Zach, because there was a need for some sort of digital freedom of coming out of all the aggression and violence that happened during that period. And now people are using those technologies today. So I guess just on a historical note, it's interesting to see how things kind of tie together. Jen, I'll throw it down to you.
Yeah, it's interesting to reflect back. I think everyone who was alive during that time, Zach, you mentioned, we can all remember what we were doing on that day. And humans are emotional beings. And I think when we reflect on the event and what's happened since then, we can see how that fear and emotion of the events of that day were weaponized against us leading up to today. And I think as we start to heal as a society, and the article mentioned this at the end, and we start to gain access to more information. I mean, if you think about when 9/11 happened, we didn't have as much access to information as we do now. At least the general public didn't. We weren't empowered with the information to really critically think about what was happening around us. And as we get that and we start to gain more access on a mainstream level to some of these DeFi products that both Will and Zach and Naomi, you've mentioned so far in this segment, I think we'll start to see society shift for good, I hope, and start to push back on some of those surveillance measures that were put in place.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic for sure, but just worthwhile noting that when governments come out with these temporary emergency measures, you should always look at it with a critical eye and just think, how long will the emergency last? Because it's very clear that they can make them last a very long time. So just having a critical eye when those things get passed. But let's move on. Let's move over to something a little more exciting. What's happening with Bitcoin adoption in El Salvador in particular.
Yes, let's talk about that. I will take us to El Salvador. What I thought was a really well done piece by CNBC. Shout out to Mackenzie, the reporter on this one, for really presenting just potentially the ultimate Bitcoin fixes this story, right? The report here from CNBC establishes a problem, establishes a potential solution, and situates it in the human experience. So, we've sort of poked fun at the El Salvador rollout over these past couple of months, but when it comes down to it, this is a country that relies heavily on remittances. It's a major part of their economy, and the way that the Bitcoin law may affect the remittance business in El Salvador is potentially really, really impactful. The other way to say this headline, instead of it costing Western Union $400 million a year, and someone else is quoted in the article saying that it could be up to $1 billion. The other way to say this is this saves Salvadorans and people in the El Salvador diaspora $400 million. And that's a really potentially powerful impact when we talk about what this law could mean for the daily lives of people in what remains quite an impoverished country. So I'm going to toss this over to Will. I mean, I think people in the crypto space have been steeped in sort of this cross-border payments. That's something that Bitcoin can really do and really be of value to the world in that respect. I think this is a great example situated in this massive countrywide rollout as to, we might get to see this in real time for the first time at scale. So I'm going to toss this to you for your initial thoughts on El Salvador remittances.
Totally. Even if nothing else in crypto or Bitcoin does not work out, if Bitcoin doesn't become peer-to-peer digital cash, it doesn't become this new money system for everyone, you have it for remittances. And I think that shouldn't be overlooked. A lot of the world is impoverished still. There's a huge portion of the world, like 30% or so. And the US just doesn't sit in that area, right? We often don't have that conversation, especially those in the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency space who are privileged enough to not have to interact with those projects or those problems. Remittance space has to deal with those. And this is a way to move money around the world globally very cheaply and very safely and cut out the middlemen. So just to your point, Zach, yes, $400 million in savings, especially for a very impoverished country like El Salvador, is not something to blink at, and it's not something to belittle at all. That's money that's back in El Salvadorians' pockets that can go back into the local economies and go back to employment for El Salvadorians to kind of boost that country. And so that's, I think, why most people should be into Bitcoin. It shouldn't be for the price. It really should be for the tech. And I know that's the meme, right? Whenever price goes down, everyone's like, I'm in it for the tech. Well, you should be in it for the tech, because that's what this is about. This is what Bitcoin is here for the first place, for freeing people from incumbent systems that are hurting their daily lives. And there's a whole lot of other stuff that's awesome out there. Decentralized finance is really cool. NFTs are really awesome. If Bitcoin ever becomes some sort of monetary system, replaces the dollar, that would be an amazing solution to money printing. But at the very basis, if you have at least one problem being fixed with cryptocurrency, then it's a worthwhile endeavor, I think, at least for like a personal career, if not just for the whole movement. Naomi, going to throw it to you.
Yeah, I mean, since the early days, remittances has always been a huge part of the dialogue around Bitcoin. This has always been what people have had their eyes on as, one of the big prizes. This is something that could be incredibly helpful. And it's nice, over a decade later, to finally see maybe things start to move there. You have CNBC talking about this and making articles saying, well, this is big competition for Western Union. So it's just very interesting to see this play out. And in terms of, El Salvador's rollout and all of that, it's such a fascinatingly complex situation, because, when early cypherpunks were talking about Bitcoin and, what would a successful state be? What would the ideal success of Bitcoin be? It would be, one of the four horsemen of the Bitcoin end of fiat apocalypse that was predicted was we're going to start to see central banks around the world start to rush to get Bitcoin in order to back their currency or to have it in their reserves. And that was always what we figured would happen. This started to be, people started to see this as a store of value, and then governments would start to rush in on that as well. And we've started to see that now. Now, just because central banks and governments start to rush in, it doesn't mean that they're immediately the good guys, right? They're still the central banks. They're still the probably dictatorial regimes or whatever. There are a lot of bad players who are going to rush in, and it's not the point. The point is that all of these people are rushing in. This is all going to drive up the utility of Bitcoin as well. It's going to help popularize it. It's going to help expose people to it. And what we're seeing now is that rush beginning. El Salvador, despite their method of rolling this out, and it's kind of been very chaotic to say the least, they've been a catalyst for this. I'm absolutely... I predict that we're going to see a lot more countries follow. So that's incredibly exciting from the point of all these remittances, from the point of all of the money that's going to be saved from all the people in these countries as they start to get on board as well. It's just incredibly exciting. But Zach, let's throw it to a break and tell us what's coming up next.
Yes, we're going to talk about Algorand. They are the latest project to throw a large pile of tokens at getting folks over to their network. We are going to talk about that and the DeFi incentive arms race that is currently going on as we speak. Stick with us. It's The Hash. We'll talk to you soon.
And welcome back to The Hash. So we're going to move over to the DeFi landscape and talk about Algorand, which is not a project you hear about often, but they want people to know about them. So they're throwing lots of cash their way. So $300 million for an innovation fund, specifically for decentralized finance products. Of course, over the last year or so, we've seen decentralized finance kind of take off as both a meme and application on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And it's kind of moved over to a few other blockchains, such as Solana. But for the most part, it's kind of stayed on Ethereum or Ethereum scaling solutions like Layer 2s, like Polygon. Algorand doesn't want that to stop or to just stay on Ethereum. Rather, it wants it to move over. So they're incentivizing developers to come over and work on their blockchain. Algorand launched most of its baseline technology in 2019. It's a proof of stake blockchain, has some ties with kind of like the professor coins of the world, the academic blockchains, where they kind of focus on trying to get like the mechanics of the underlying blockchain more performative than some of the other networks out there. Ethereum is very focused on the community and kind of getting things solved on that front. So kind of a split there in terms of which blockchain we're talking about. Zach, I want to throw this to you. Of course, we've seen a lot of different blockchains trying to get DeFi or NFTs or something going on top of their chain. For the most part, a lot of these chains are ghost chains, and they're trying to get some of Ethereum's real estate. So what did you make of this headline?
I'm trying to think about the best way to explain this stuff from people who are on the outside looking in. You know, we saw Harmony do this. We saw Algorand do this. We saw Avalanche do this. We've seen all sorts of projects do this. And if you're looking from the outside in, you're like, $300 million? Like just giving out $300 million? Where does this money come from? And what the story of these networks is that they have a bunch of money. They have a bunch of tokens, right? They have a bunch of monopoly money. But monopoly money is only valuable if you have people to play the game with you. So what they're saying is, hey, we're going to give out some of our monopoly money, and if you're going to use it and build on this network of ours, it's going to become valuable because it's a shared experience that we can all participate in. So I think what's happening in the space right now is that all these networks see this opportunity. They're looking to bring over top projects that will then in turn attract users, and they're looking to be the silver to Ethereum's gold right now as it relates to being a smart contract platform that can do stuff. So it's super duper interesting. We've seen it work, you know. This is money, and crypto is an experiment in incentives. And typically incentives work. So if you put enough incentives out there for people to vote with their feet and build on or use these networks, we've seen that have some success. We saw that have success with Avalanche. You know, I think we saw a little bit of success with Cello. They did something similarly. So there's all this activity going on right now, and I think you know, I think it's something we've been sort of anticipating for a number of years. This battle for the base layer. Who is going to be the other big gun when it comes to the smart contract platforms of the world? Because the opportunity is becoming increasingly large, and that's why we're seeing increasingly large piles of tokens being thrown at this problem. I don't know. I think the monopoly money thing, like, I got to refine that. We'll figure out how to make that work. But I'm going to toss it to Naomi in the meantime.
So I think that when we're talking about the battle for the base layer, it's actually very telling to look at where their first super grants are directed. So the first super grant is going to support applications for building bridges between Algorand. I want to say Algorand. I think we're so used to saying like things with land. Algorand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got this, Jen.
So
between Algorand and other networks like Ethereum, so they're really thinking about how do we create a world where all of these islands are connected? How do we build bridges between them all? So it's not just going to be one city and then, you know, everyone's going to be moving into the city and we're going to be piling higher and higher and building skyscrapers. No, we've got this archipelago and we're just creating bridges across all of them. So that's really where their mind is at. That's where a lot of these DeFi spaces, their minds are at. They're all looking at building bridges at the moment, which is very interesting. And the second super grant will seek proposals for integrating Oracle networks. So again, all about the bridges. The first one is bridges between the digital spaces. The second one is bridges between digital spaces and the real world. How do we get real world data into the blockchains? So I love that idea of connectivity. I love that that's the focus of these platforms. And I love what that's going to do, you know, to the world and shape society. If we think about connectivity in terms of communication and what the internet did to reshape society, just creating those bridges between people's computers just was incredible. It changed everything, right? And so what happens when this applies to finance? What happens when this applies to unique digital assets in this digital realm? I just think it's so incredibly exciting to watch all of this play out. And it seems that everyone really has their eye on the prize. They're looking at the same thing. They're talking about connectivity rather than, you know, potentially just being the one. That narrative seems to have long since shifted. I don't think there is going to be the one. I mean, even you, Zach, the analogy you just said before, you were like, who's going to become the silver to Ethereum's gold? And I'm like, that kind of took me back. I was like, whoa, he just called Ethereum gold? Like, it was always Bitcoin is the gold and Ethereum is the silver to Bitcoin's gold. And now it's like Ethereum. So the fact that all of that is just changing and shifting constantly, it's really exciting to watch. But Jen, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I believe in the last 24 hours, Algorand's price hit an all-time high. And they are also the official blockchain provider for the El Salvadorian government, along with several CBDC projects. So, and they're doing a lot of interesting things. So, and we never talk about them. So I look forward to seeing what headline we talk about next. But let's move on over to the UK. So the UK Post Office is now going to allow customers to purchase crypto vouchers using its Easy ID verification app starting next week. People who use the app, which helps users securely verify their identity, age, and other details, will be able to purchase vouchers that can be redeemed for Bitcoin or Ether from decentralized exchange Swarm markets. So a lot going on here. I am all for on-ramps to the crypto space. And so I think this could be cool, but I also see a lot of barriers here. You have to use the verification app that is provided by the office to then get a voucher, to then go to the decentralized exchange to receive your Bitcoin and Ether. And that seems like a lot of steps. I feel like there are easier solutions for people who want to acquire Bitcoin and Ether, but I'm going to throw this to you, Will, first for your opinion on this innovation in the UK.
I'm just extremely confused. So maybe you can help me understand a little bit more. Like, why would I go to the post office to buy cryptocurrency?
This is also my question. So they have an app, which I'm assuming people in the UK use to verify their identity. And through this app, there's now a new offering for a voucher. So I can go on there and buy a voucher that is redeemable at a decentralized exchange.
See,
and
I don't know.
That is the information we have.
Is like the post office more advanced than it is here in the States? Because like I don't know
was
why
also
I'd go to
thinking that.
anything.
Everything
with
is
the post
more
office.
advanced than the post office in the
They
United States.
They can't even get me my mail most of the time. Also in Canada. So maybe they figured it out in the UK.
Yeah, I feel like the mail's the mail. It's not exactly the quickest thing on earth. So why would I go to them to buy cryptocurrency? Like, why would I get tech support from the government? That just doesn't make sense to me. Naomi, do you have a... No, you probably don't have a more optimistic thought than I do, but maybe.
I don't have a more optimistic. I have more questions. So how can something be redeemable to a decentralized exchange? If they're decentralizing, who's doing the redeeming? Like, I don't quite understand. Have they integrated it somehow and these vouchers have price on the open market that's freely exchangeable? Because how does that even work if the post office can just like create them out of thin air? Like, what value would that even have in the crypto space and the free market? Like, I don't understand this whole moving it over and cashing it in the DeFi market. Like, does anyone understand how that process works?
Maybe they have a smart contract and they've just been like hoarding all the Solidity developers that everyone needs out there. Just racking it up.
So confusing.
Are stamps still legal tender? Have you ever heard of that? Is that still the thing?
Wasn't stamps
like
I
at
don't
one
know
point
if
like
they
legal
still
tender?
are.
You like buy stuff with stamps. It feels like that. So that's all I'm going to offer this conversation.
It's very strange. I mean, in Australia, you've actually been able to buy crypto at post office for a while. It's very interesting. And so it's not like out of the ordinary, like for this thing to be happening and for post offices to be getting involved with this. It's not the first country to be exploring this. But yeah, it is a very strange thing because in Australia, I believe you just buy the crypto outright. And maybe people can fact check me if that's incorrect. I haven't actually done it personally, and I don't plan to go back to Australia for a very long time. But it's very strange for me to see a voucher system. I don't quite understand that double step. It's like, crypto doesn't have enough barriers to entry. People can just go and buy it directly. Let's add in some middlemen. Let's go to the post office and then you buy a voucher and then you go to the decentralized exchange. It's like they don't know how to exist without middlemen. It's fascinating.
It's like the grandmother's way to acquiring Bitcoin. Just go through all the steps, go to the post office.
All the steps. It's on my shopping list. It's very interesting. So it's like they're claiming to be the world's first regulated decentralized finance protocol. Again, I don't even understand. Yeah, I don't understand how that works either. Who holds the license? Is that divvied up into a bunch of different components and all of the people who own governance tokens, own that license? Like, I just don't understand how, if something is truly decentralized, it can be licensed. So that's a fascinating thing, but maybe we'll get some more information about this.
Maybe
and we can dive into it later.
Will reach out to us and give us some answers.
That would be great. Yeah.
Maybe countries are just DAOs. What do you think about that? Is that
Yeah,
is that
absolutely. I
No?
think it
Does
should
that
be.
work?
Every
No?
country
Okay.
should be as ours.
I love that we have
Like
a final
voting and
thought
stuff?
now on this
Governance?
show. We
Anyway.
end the show with a really nice final thought, and that's been going on for a few days in a row. I hope that continues.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there for today. We'll leave it there for this week. It's been a fun week here on The Hash. We'll be back again next week, but I did want to tell you about something very exciting for next week. We, CoinDesk, are going to be at the SALT conference in New York City. This is where all the finance bigwigs get together and talk about stuff. Anthony Scaramucci is going to be there. Sam Bankman-Fried is going to be there. Lots of people are going to be there, and we're going to talk to a lot of them, and they're going to be on CoinDesk TV, giving you all the inside scoop on crypto and the world of Wall Street. So stick with us for that. It's going to be fun. And then we'll also have The Hash, so that's cool. I'm Zach. Naomi will be here. I bet Will's going to be around. Jen, yeah, she's going to be here. We're going to do it again next week. It's going to be great. And we hope that you have a good weekend until then. So thanks for tuning in.
Yay.
We'll see you later. Have a good Friday.
Have fun, guys.
Bye.